Welcome. The following is a Los Angeles and San Francisco ACM SIGGRAPH presentation, Shark Tracking with Dr. Chris Lowe. Our speaker will present the latest developments from their Shark Lab at California State University, Long Beach. I'm Joan Collins, chair of LA SIGGRAPH. We are the Los Angeles professional chapter of the Association for Computer Machinery's Special Interest Group on Computer Graphics and Interactive Techniques. We are co-presenting with San Francisco SIGGRAPH. Henry, are you here with us? There you are. Can you just say a few words about San Francisco?
Sure. Thanks, Joan. The San Francisco SIGGRAPH chapter is best found probably on Facebook or SIGGRAPH San Francisco chapter. We do a lot of different events. We do visual effects events, feature animation, video games, lately some AI events, and lots of different things, and some more technical events as well. Our treasurer is Teresa Flaxman. Our vice chair is Cassidy Curtis, and Andy Wang is our secretary. We do a lot of interesting events. A lot of them are virtual. So please check us out and join us for one of them. Thanks a lot.
I really like what we've been doing lately the last couple of years, Henry, which is, trying to join together with a chapter up and down the West Coast, just to kind of mix it up and just kind of get different ideas going into these chapters. I think that's really been working out. This is the second one that we've done with San Francisco. We did one with Silicon Valley. But anyway, there are a lot of us out there. If you want to start looking into how many chapters there are. Anyway, thanks for being with us, Henry. I know you'll be here the whole entire meeting.
Right.
We are live from Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Long Beach, California. Our attendees are here from around the world, and we are also recording this panel to watch on our website. I'm sure that you're all going to really enjoy Dr. Chris Lowe, a professor in marine biology and director of the Shark Lab. But first, I'd like to thank our electronic services team for providing this webinar around the world. I'd also like to thank Los Angeles chapter and San Francisco chapter of ACM SIGGRAPH and all of those from Shark Lab and who helped us put this together. For those of you on Zoom, please put your questions into the Q&A at the bottom of your screen so that we can get them to our panelists. The Shark Lab's website can be posted also in the chat window. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our speaker from the Shark Lab to present their latest developments using their lab's latest technologies. Dr. Chris Lowe is a professor in marine biology at the California State University, Long Beach. We'll have to get that one straightened out with us. Chris Lowe is of the Shark Lab there. He's been studying sharks and rays and bony fishes. Oh, what did your mother teach you? Anyway, and he's been studying the juvenile white sharks off the coast of Southern California. I just don't know. Using a wide array of technology, which is what SIGGRAPH also wants to hear about. They have found that white sharks use Southern California beaches seasonally as a nursery habitat for their young. This brings juvenile white sharks in close proximity to our beachgoers, not something that we're all real happy about. Dr. Lowe and his students use technologies and educators to help lifeguards and the public understand the mysterious lives of sharks and just how much of a threat they actually pose. Oh, please tell me they're just puffy, cuddly, warm little things that we can go out and pet. Anyway, please welcome Professor and Director of the Shark Lab, Dr. Chris Lowe. Chris, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. It's great to talk to your group, and I'm gonna be unapologetic in terms of we need help. We have lots and lots of data that I'll talk about tonight.
I think our group would love to hear that. I know we are on a short time constraint, so I'll just hand over the reins to you to just have at it, and you can screen share all you want. Chris, have a good talk.
Great. Thank you very much. So what I'm going to talk about tonight is a little bit about some of the research that we've been doing, some of the tools that we use, and some of the challenges that we're facing in terms of making the data appealing to the public and understandable. So the reason why we're focusing on white sharks, and you know, I always kind of joke about Shark Week, but in California, what we've really been facing is what we call Shark Decade, because white sharks and many other species of sharks have been recovering because of conservation efforts and better fisheries management. So I think this is kind of surprising. Most people think of the white shark as the iconic species, you know, the species that we think about when we think of Jaws, right? And of course, when Jaws was written and when the movie was made, we knew very little about white sharks or any species of shark for that matter. So that really, that book and the movie painted this image of sharks in people's minds that we've found very difficult to change. And as we've learned more based on all this new technology that we've had, we're discovering that white sharks are probably a lot less scary than Peter Benchley and Steven Spielberg made them out to be. So one of the things we do know is that white sharks were overfished. They were caught in commercial fisheries. They were sold in fish markets. Chances are, if you ate fish tacos in California in the mid-90s, you probably ate white shark and did not know it. So, but they were protected in 1994 by the state of California, making it illegal for anybody to land them. And the other thing that really allowed the white shark population to come back was that seals and sea lions that were overhunted back in the early 1900s, which didn't receive protection until the 70s, have made a tremendous recovery. So it's these things that have allowed white sharks to come back. Now, you know, as a shark biologist and a conservation biologist, I go, yay, sharks are coming back. The interesting thing is not everybody cheers when I say that. So a lot of our research has been focused on what happens now that there are more sharks along our coast. So one of the things that people are worried about is there are more concerns about more white sharks along the coast. Working with lifeguards, they have told us that sightings have increased fivefold in the last 10 years. So more and more white sharks are seen along Southern California beaches. We also have to remember that in Southern California, we have one of the most heavily populated coastlines in the world. There are 20 million people that live along the Southern California coastline that enjoy ocean recreation year round. So that means that there are a lot of people and sharks in the water together. And we have some of the most populated beaches in the world. In addition, lifeguards have told us when white sharks started showing up at beaches, that resulted in a lot of beach closures. And one of the things our research has found is that beach closures cost the local economy. So every time a beach is closed, it's going to cost the local economy money, and it's hurting the California economy. So understanding why sharks are there and what they're doing there is really important and may prevent the need for shutting down beaches. And of course, we have had no increase in the number of bites, despite the fact there are more people in the water and more sharks along the coast. However, when bites do occur, they do get a lot of media attention, and that usually goes national, international, which again can affect the California economy. So one of the things that we've learned over the last 10 years, working very closely with all the ocean lifeguards in California, is that they didn't have enough information about the sharks off our beaches in order to make good management decisions. When should they pull people out of the water? Under what conditions is it safe for people to be in the water with white sharks? And do they really pose a significant safety risk? Unfortunately, we couldn't give them any answers. Now, in 2018, we co-authored a bill with Assemblymember Patrick O'Donnell, who basically got us state funding to ramp up our research program studying white sharks in California for this basic purpose. So in 2018, we received $3.75 million from the state for 5 years to develop a research program, education and outreach program. And the goal was to try to address safety concerns for the general public. So our research program really focused on where are white sharks along their coast, when are they in nearshore waters, in other words, close to beaches where people are swimming, what are they doing while they're near shore, how long do they stay, when are they near people, do they pose a significant risk, how do people feel about that, and of course, what are the economic impacts of beach closures or shark bites on the public? So then if we use a variety of our science tools that I'll talk about to answer these questions, the question is, who needs that information? So we've developed an education program that directly feeds this information to lifeguards, who are our research partners, to fishers who accidentally catch these sharks, to junior lifeguards, K through 12 students. So we have a whole series of education programs that go along with a lot of the information we gather. And that's why digital animation information about our data is so important. It becomes such a powerful tool to convey what we're learning. In addition, we have an outreach program for the public. And that outreach program has to target two different groups: locals, which have a certain degree of knowledge about what animals live in their nearshore waters. And then, of course, tourists that are coming from all over the world. So right now, the California Shark Beach Safety Program incorporates these three major arms. Okay, so a little bit about what we know about white sharks. We know from past research that adult white sharks are typically found around the central California coast or around the offshore islands, particularly in the winter through maybe early spring months. And then those animals migrate offshore to the middle of the Pacific, halfway between Baja and Hawaii. And then maybe 9 months to a year and a half later, they'll migrate back to the Southern California or the California coast. So we also know, based on those migrations, that juveniles start showing up. Young, very young white sharks, newborns, start showing up at our beaches starting as early as April. So we think females are coming back, giving birth somewhere in Southern California, and then the babies show up at our beaches. So we have three possible explanations as to why they choose to use beaches as a nursery habitat. One is this provides them safety. They don't know they're a white shark yet. So they're very small. They're only about 5 feet long at birth. A female will give birth to anywhere from 2 to about 15 pups at a time. And then they tend to stay about 100 yards off the beach, just outside the wave break. So we think the number one reason why they use this habitat is it's safer. There are fewer large predators. And if they're going to spend appreciable time there, they also have to figure out what to eat. And they do this all on their own. There's no parental care with white sharks. They're born completely on their own. So we think the number one thing that they're feeding on are stingrays. And we have hundreds of thousands of stingrays along Southern California beaches. And then, of course, the water's warmer closer to the shoreline than it is further offshore. And that enables them to grow faster. And the faster they grow, the safer they will be. So based on these basic hypotheses that we have, we use a variety of technologies in the Shark Lab to answer all of those questions. So one form of technology we use are called spot tags. And these get bolted to the shark's dorsal fin, and they are a powerful radio transmitter that transmit to satellites in orbit. Now, they only transmit when the fin and the antenna of that transmitter breaks the surface. And then if 3 or more of these satellites are able to get a position, they can actually get a geolocation. So every time that fin breaks the surface, these things are transmitting to satellites. And then I get an email alert from the satellite service, by the way, the most expensive cell phone service in the world. And then every time I get an alert, they will give me a latitude, longitude, time, date, and the ID of that shark. But the minute that shark goes underwater, because this is high frequency radio waves, they cannot penetrate through seawater. The transmitter turns off. So they only transmit when the shark's at the surface. Now, sharks are not like marine mammals. They don't have to come to the surface to breathe. So when we first started putting this technology on the sharks, we didn't know how much information we would get back. But it does give us a lat long anywhere on the planet at any time, as long as they're at the surface. So we also tag the sharks with this other form of technology, which are known as pop-off archiving satellite tags. These get darted into the shark's back. Now, this transmitter basically has a temperature sensor, a light sensor, and a depth sensor. A little computer that's logging temperature, light, and depth every 30 seconds for a pre-described period of time. And then it's designed to pop off the shark, float up to the surface, and then upload all its data to the satellite, which then downloads it to me in my office. So using this technology, we get a really accurate record of the temperature, the depth, that shark moved through as it migrated along a couple thousand miles of the coastline. Now, if we really want to know how close sharks get to beaches, we have to use another form of technology, and that is called acoustic telemetry. So instead of these radio transmitters that are operating in the megahertz range or gigahertz range, these acoustic transmitters are operating in the kilohertz range. So our transmitters operate at 69 kilohertz. If we catch the shark, we can flip the shark upside down and we can surgically implant an acoustic transmitter into its body cavity. And the advantage of putting it inside the shark is it stays in there indefinitely, but it can't foul with algae or barnacles and things that would irritate the shark. If we can't catch the shark, we can dart these transmitters into the shark's back. They'll only stay in a year or two or so, but basically the way this technology works is when a shark gets within about 300 yards of one of our underwater acoustic receivers that are all along Southern California beaches, when that tag is detected, the receiver will log the time, the date, the ID number. Now, some of the transmitters that we can put on the sharks also have temperature and depth sensors or even accelerometers on them. So we get some indication of the temperature and the depth of the water that they're at when we detect them, and even something about their acceleration. Now, the fourth form of technology we use, and this is one of my favorites, are called smart tags. So think of a smart tag like a Fitbit for a shark. It's got a 3D accelerometer, 3D gyroscope, 3D magnetometer, a temperature sensor, a depth sensor. It's all logging to this device. It's got an acoustic transmitter so we can follow the shark from a boat. It's got a video logger so we can see what the shark sees. And this clamps onto its dorsal fin and will stay on the shark for about 24 to 48 hours. Pop off the shark, float to the surface, has a radio transmitter so we can relocate it, get it back, download it, and get a high resolution of what that shark did over the last 24 hours. So those accelerometers are now recording data at about 30 hertz. So one of the challenges in getting all this amazing technology on these sharks is how do we catch them and tag them? So in the early days, the way we got access to sharks was from commercial fishers that accidentally caught them in their nets. So they would call us up, we would race down to the docks, we would meet a commercial fisherman who would have the shark in a big holding tank. And then we could take these little sharks, take measurements, take blood samples, tissue samples for genetics, attach all these different types of transmitters, take them out and let them go, and then wait for them to tell us what they're doing. So based on this technology, we've been able to tag hundreds of sharks using this tool. Now, one of the challenges was in the early days, there weren't very many fishermen catching these sharks. And what we found was the sharks were actually spending very much of their time close to the shoreline. So in fact, they were so close to the shoreline that we couldn't use fishing boats to access the sharks. So we started working with all the ocean lifeguards in California. And when these shark aggregations form, we could go at those beaches, either collaborating with lifeguards, and we could either be on the back of a lifeguard jet ski and we'd use drones to spot the sharks or helicopters. And then they would tell the jet ski operator where the shark was. We could drive up alongside the shark, and then one of my grad students could roll into the water and we could dart a transmitter into the shark's back. So that's one method of doing it. This one's a little risky. We can only do it when the water's really clear, where we can see the sharks very clearly. The other technique is we can just drive up alongside them in a boat and use the drone to estimate the size of the shark and then tag the shark. Now, we also have dip cameras that we can dip underneath the water so that we can see the shark from underneath to tell whether it's a male or a female. So by gathering all this information, we've been able to tag on average about 60 sharks a year. So we have about 225 sharks carrying active transmitters right now that we can track along the coast. So to give you an idea of some of our, this is what I would call some of our better animations. These are some data from some sharks that we tagged back in 2007. This is a baby white shark. It's about 5.5 feet long. It was caught in Ventura. And this is from the pop-off satellite tag data. So because it's using temperature, light, and depth, we can use light levels to estimate day length. And if you know day length and you have a really accurate clock, you can estimate latitude and longitude, just like ancient mariners. And then we can use sea surface temperature globally to basically correct for where the position we think that shark is. So here's some data. What you're going to see is a black smudge up here. Here will be a date counter. And then what you'll see is sea surface temperature that's based on satellite data that we collect from NOAA. So what you're going to see here is an animation of time. This is during the summer. This is July. You can see the shark is somewhere in the middle of that black smudge is the actual position. And you can see as the season wears on and we get to October, you can see the water starts cooling down. And when the water starts cooling down, that is a cue that starts driving this migratory pattern where almost all the sharks prior to 2015 showed this southern migration to Baja. And many of the tags would pop off in this area called Vizcaino Bay. Now, what was really interesting is the same year we had an opportunity for a white shark that was caught in Southern California, but taken up to Monterey Bay Aquarium and kept on exhibit there for 5 months. That shark gained 100 pounds in 5 months. And the aquarists got worried because it started jumping and eating other animals in their big open ocean tank. So they elected to release it in Monterey in February. So we used the same tagging technology. And what you'll notice here is juvenile white sharks don't like cold water. You can see how fast that shark booked it out of that cold water, came all the way down to Mazatlan. And then in the spring, the slug of warm water pushes up from the equator and actually drove this shark up into the Sea of Cortez, into the Gulf of California. And right before the tag popped off, sea surface temperature was around 84 degrees. So what these tracks told us is that baby white sharks have this kind of Goldilocks sort of thing. They don't like water too cold. They don't like it too warm. They like it just right. And just right for them is about our summer water temperature. So using this information, we've been able to show people how water temperature influences the movements of these sharks. So all our satellite telemetry data is now publicly available. It's all free and it's all online. And it's all well categorized and all the metadata are very well defined. And here kind of just gives you an example. Here's a paper that we published describing those data. And they're all free. So they're open to any scientist, anybody who wants to use it. It's a very rich data set and it's well curated. One of the other challenges we have with our program is because it takes my divers, those underwater receivers that are listening for the tag sharks with the acoustic tags, a diver has to pick those up and download them and then put them back. So it takes my team about a month to download all 120 receivers from Morro Bay to the San Diego, Mexico border. So lifeguards were saying, you know, it's taking too long to get data. Do you have any other options? So we, working with the manufacturer of this technology, developed these buoys. These are real-time receiver buoys. Now, when a tag shark swims by one of these buoys, instead of having a diver download it, it pumps data up into the cloud, which then sends lifeguards a text alert. The lifeguards can then take that text alert, click on that, takes them to a website. And what this shows are the locations of some of our buoys. Green indicates recent detections. Red indicates no detections or offline buoy. And then all these panels you see here, think of them like baseball cards for sharks or different animals. So here, for example, this is a bat ray that we tagged. It was white shark food that we're tagging and tracking. And you can see we received 189 detections. And the last one was 2 minutes ago. And this was off Santa Barbara. So these are all different animals, some of which had temperature sensors or depth sensors in them. And then the lifeguards can click on one of these and it gives them all the stats of that animal. And then there's even an animation tool that's very poor that shows them where that animal has been. So by using this technology, lifeguards are now making better decisions. Like if there's an 8-foot white shark off their beach and it's there every single day and no surfers are reporting seeing it, they don't even bother closing beaches anymore. They just post signs saying, this is white shark habitat, you know, use at your own risk. So this information has been very useful for the lifeguards in terms of helping them make decisions on when they really need to close beaches. So to give you an idea how many of these acoustic receivers we have out, all these red dots you see are the locations of our receivers along Southern California beaches. So we cover about 600 miles of coastline. And then we have receivers around offshore islands, and we collaborate with the Channel Islands National Marine Sanctuary that helps us maintain an array of receivers around the offshore islands where the adults hang out. So by using this technology, we're able to basically track individuals over periods of like 10 years. So some of the transmitters that we surgically implant into sharks have a 10-year battery life. So I'm going to show you, I have to apologize, this is by far our worst animation. But what you'll see is a time and date counter here. You'll see detections, and they're obviously not crossing land sharks. These aren't land sharks. But we haven't figured out how to make our animations go around lands and points between the locations where we have our receivers. But what you're seeing is over time and date, how many sharks are being detected. And this is just 2020. These are all the sharks that we had tagged that we detected that year. And you'll notice that there are certain hotspots where we detect sharks kind of regularly. And some of these hotspots are nursery hotspots that individuals may use for weeks or months at a time, or they'll hopscotch between these hotspots. So again, we could really use help with this animation. So one of the things that we've learned is that these hotspots, these nursery hotspots, where we'll get aggregations of sharks. And to give you an example, our biggest aggregations may be up to 40 individuals at a single beach. And they will use a 2-mile stretch of beach day in, day out, back and forth for weeks, months, even years at a time. And then for whatever reason, these hotspots will go cold. So for example, in 2010 to 2012, Santa Monica Bay was a hotspot for white sharks. We didn't detect them anywhere else except there. And then those areas went cold. And recently it's been Carpinteria, which has been hot still. And now down off Torrey Pines and Del Mar area is another big hotspot. So the aggregation sizes are growing and they change from period to period, and we don't really understand fully why. So one of the ways we're trying to figure out what they're doing at a beach, how much time they're spending at an aggregation. One of my grad students, Emily Spurgeon, just finished her master's project studying this aggregation or this population that we've been tracking at Carpinteria Beach. So this is Padero. By the way, George Lucas's house is right around here. So there's an aggregation of juvenile white sharks, and we've counted up to 40 individuals there in one day. And then we have an array of acoustic receivers out here. So remember, these acoustic receivers are on the seafloor. We have tagged sharks that we've tagged in the area. If a shark is detected by 3 or more receivers at the same time, we can use that information to trilaterate a position, an actual location of that shark. So what Emily's project was doing was tracking individuals relative to environmental conditions. So basically what Emily had to do was we had temperature data loggers on the seafloor. We had temperature data loggers at the surface, so we could characterize the water temperature on the bottom and at the surface. And she developed these 3-dimensional interpolated temperature maps. So what you're seeing are changes in seafloor temperature at this beach location. So the water ranges anywhere from 0 depth to about 35 feet deep out here to the edge of this array. So this is daily changes in water temperature. So it's very dynamic habitat. So by measuring these sorts of parameters, Emily used a variety of tools to kind of fill in gaps so that we could better interpolate the 3D temperature profile of this habitat. So this is kind of unique because this required other high-resolution tools. So here's our autonomous underwater vehicle. And on the nose of this autonomous vehicle is a full ocean sensor suite. So it's measuring water temperature, depth, the amount of chlorophyll, the amount of plankton in the water, the amount of turbidity, the amount of oxygen. And it also has video cameras fore and aft so we can see what's happening around this area. Now we can program this robot to move through the water column, running these tracks like lawnmower pattern, and then it moves up and down through the water column between the seafloor and the sea surface so that we can characterize the 3D environment in this area where we're tracking these sharks in high resolution. Now, as you can see down here, it takes about 6.5 hours to map basically 374 football fields worth of 3D habitat. And then we have this immense data set with all these different variables that we need to be able to map and plot in 3D. So one of the other challenges that we had is that sharks are curious about the robot as a propeller. It makes a noise. And we had situations where sharks were coming over and biting our robot. Now, by the way, this autonomous vehicle is about $250,000. So every time it got bitten, I was freaked out that we would lose it or it would implode or something like that. But fortunately, they were only little nips. So I think the sharks are actually playing with it. So to give you an idea what some of this data looked like in 2D, so here would be the temperature profile for that habitat at 0 at the very surface. This is 1 meter down. This is 2 meters down, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So you can see that at this site, there's what we call a thermocline. In other words, the surface water is very warm, but then there's a point down at the bottom where the water gets cold. So what's happening is there's this basically a layer in which sharks can stay warm. If they want to stay warm, they can stay at the surface. But if they want to cool down, and where a lot of their food is at the bottom, they move through that thermocline. So they can actually select different bodies of water, choose water temperatures that best suit them. So Emily used all these forms of technology, these temperature data loggers, the robots, the buoys that we have there, even the sharks with temperature tags, to create this 3D temperature model. And it's a feed-forward neural network model. And we had a statistician grad student help us with this model, but it's enabled us to do this 3D interpolation. So using this technique, we're able to do that hourly for the entire site across 8 months per year. And we've done this now for 3 years. So to give you an idea what this looks like, so here's our array. Each dot you see is a tag shark that's being tracked. Here's our time and date counter, and you can see seafloor temperature changing underneath them. So one of the things I want to point out is that there's a rocky reef located right here, and there's another rocky reef here. And one of the things that we noted is that these sharks, and this are, these are all juvenile white sharks between about 5 and 9 feet long, are all kind of moving back and forth along this beach area day and night, weeks and weeks at a time. This is only 1 week's worth of data. So for example, in 2020, we got 4 million detections between May 15th to the 9th, and we were able to render about 194 geopositions from 25 different sharks over that time period. So this is the largest, most high-resolution data set that has ever been collected for a shark. So to give you an idea what this looks like by week, we're not overlaying this over water temperature because computationally that was getting pretty expensive. So these are just color-coded individuals. So this is in July, this is in the month of August, this is in September, and this is in November. So remember I told you the very small sharks migrate south in the winter when our water temperatures dip below 60 degrees. So you can see there are only 3 sharks being detected when our water temperatures dipped into the 50s off this location. But this gives you an idea of some of our cursory animations of how these sharks move. And when the public sees these, they get really intrigued because they don't imagine these sharks clustering like this. And they always ask, are they social? And we don't really have an answer to that yet. So if we look at some of our shark smart tag data, so this is that Fitbit that I was telling you about that one of my grad students, Connor White, built. So it's got a 3D accelerometer, 3D gyroscope, 3D magnetometer. It's recording all of those things at 30 hertz. It's got a temperature and depth sensor that's recording at 10 hertz. And then it's got a video logger here, and this clamps on the shark's dorsal fin and points down the head so we can see what the shark sees. So every motion the shark is making is being recorded by the accelerometer. And then it's got an acoustic transmitter that allows us to follow the shark from a boat for 24 hours, day and night. And then when that tag pops off, it floats to the surface and it has a radio transmitter so that we can recover it. Now, in 2015, we had an aggregation of white sharks in Long Beach Harbor. They were right off Belmont Shore. So we had 3 sharks, juvenile white sharks, one of which we tagged with one of these Fitbits, and we followed it for 24 hours. So based on the acceleration data, we were able to determine the depth of the shark. These are the offshore oil islands that you see along Long Beach. And you can see the shark is basically moving along this area and going deeper at night. And then we get a compass heading from the magnetometer. Obda is overall body acceleration. So if we sum all 3 axes of the accelerometer together, they give us a metric of activity, overall activity. So you can see that the shark is being most active at periods right around here. This is during the day. There's some periods of activity, but at night, when they're deep, they seem to be the least active. And then we can get tail beat amplitude, how wide are their tails wagging, tail beat frequency, how fast are their tails beating, and the water temperatures that they move through. Now, one of the things that we found really interesting was we tagged 3 sharks using this technology in 2015. And 2 of the sharks did something very unusual. When we were looking at the video that we were getting, it looked like the video camera had been knocked at a 45-degree angle for about 20 minutes. And after 20 minutes, it flipped back the other direction at a 45-degree angle. And we thought maybe the camera or the package was moving on the shark. So for 4 hours, this thing would flip back and forth every 20 minutes. when we looked at the acceleration data, what we found was these sharks were swimming in a 30-foot diameter circle in a bank like a plane in one direction for 20 minutes. And then they would reverse and go back the other direction for 20 minutes. And then every 20 minutes, reverse their direction of the circle. And they would do this for 4 hours. 2 different individuals both did this within the 24-hour period. So my grad students were all very excited about this, and we started looking in the literature. And it turns out researchers have put little EEG caps on birds that fly, that migrate, continuously fly while they migrate. And what they do is they turn off half their brain and they will fly in a circle in one direction. Then they turn off the other half of their brain and fly in a circle in the other direction. And that is how they sleep. Now, white sharks must continuously swim in order to breathe. So the question every kid has ever asked me is, how do they sleep? And for the first time, based on this technology, we think we might have figured out how juvenile white sharks may take naps. So our next step would be developing an EEG cap that we could put on a white shark that would enable us to look at brain activity to see if they're exhibiting this unihemispheric sleep that dolphins, whales, and these migratory birds exhibit. So one of the other questions we wanted to address is, how often are people and sharks together at the same time? And what is the risk? So to do this, we chose to use drones. So drones have become a very cheap, cost-effective tool with high-resolution cameras, with good GPS units on them, so you get a lot of information. So one of my grad students, Patrick Rex, did his master's thesis using drones, flying surveys along all Southern California beaches. So basically, Patrick used a standard DJI off-the-shelf drone. He basically flew 500 surveys for 215 survey days, covering, I think it was 36 beaches in California, logging 420 hours of footage, and we covered about 145 kilometers of coastline doing this. In addition, many of the lifeguards had their own drones and would fly surveys for us. ABC Eyewitness News would fly surveys for us when they were flying along the coast. And we had a couple other universities that helped us out as well. So Patrick then took all these data, and to give you an example what his surveys look like. So here's a survey along the coastline. And basically, he's flying so he could keep part of the coastline in the viewfinder. And then we could correlate all these environmental features at that beach with the environmental data and the flight data that we get from the drone. So now Patrick's challenge was, he's got this very rich video data set with all this metadata that gives us all this information about his altitude. We know how the frame size, so we know how many pixels there are to the frame. Now our next step was to calculate or count all these objects, identify surfers, swimmers, paddleboarders, measure their distance from the wave break, their distance from the shoreline, and their distance from sharks. So basically, Patrick relied on some machine learning tools. So we used some KNN type approaches, and I had an army of undergrads classify, I think it was 6,000 images of surfers, swimmers, stand-up paddleboarders, sharks, dolphins, sea lions, to develop the machine learning algorithm that would identify these objects. So then using that, we're using things like computer vision to enhance that. So one of the things that Patrick found was when he looked at the distribution of all the water users and sharks. So measuring their distance from the wave break, anything inside here is in the wash. Anything outside, this is outside the wave break. So you'll notice the water user groups that interact with sharks the most include stand-up paddlers and surfers, particularly when they're waiting for waves. Then we have swimmers, bodyboarders, and waders are really in the wash where the sharks don't spend any time. So this is the first time this has ever been documented, how much time sharks spend around people. So in 97% of his surveys at aggregation sites, he found sharks in close proximity to people. So this is that same Padero Beach where Emily did her study tracking. And what you'll notice here is the blue indicate places where Patrick saw water users. The red indicates the area that we detected sharks, and the triangles indicate where there are sharks, where he cited sharks. So you'll notice that based on this, there's a high degree of overlap between where the sharks are spending their time and where people are swimming and surfing. Now, what's really interesting is there's only 1 or 2 beach access areas here, one here and one here. So majority of the human access to this beach is restricting how much beach they actually use. So when we looked at the other aggregation site, which was down off Del Mar, again, what we see is here's human activity use, and there's beach access here, 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 here. Spreads people out along that area. There's a reef here, and this is one of the best surf breaks in Del Mar's right here. And of course, this is where Patrick saw most of the sharks, is in this area right here. So again, for the first time using this tool, we're able to characterize how often are people and sharks in the water together. Now, the next question is, so what? What does that mean? So now using computer vision, my data scientist has been using those video that we've analyzed and that machine learning algorithm to identify these objects. And now we can track these objects. So here we have a shark and we have a percent confidence. These are surfers identified based on that machine learning algorithm. And now what he's done is using that computer vision model, we can then take and give coordinates to this. In other words, we can turn this into meters or latitude and longitude, and now we can track and measure the orientation and distance of sharks to people. So now we can ask, are sharks attracted to water users? Are they attracted to swimmers more than surfers? Do they completely ignore them? Or are they repelled by them? So by using this technology, we're now able to look at how sharks interact with people. And some of our preliminary analysis of this data right now indicate that sharks treat people like flotsam, because pretty much that's what they are. At these beaches, they're floating objects that these young sharks that spend day and night at these beaches have learned to become accustomed to. They realize they're not food and they don't pose a threat, and they basically ignore people. So using these tools, we're able to better start to quantify these things for the very first time anywhere in the world. So our next question is, what are they eating? So they're at these locations for weeks or months at a time. We know one of the things the young sharks are eating are stingrays because there's lots of them. Here's some drone footage. All these objects you see here are all round stingrays. So we call them pancakes, juvenile white shark pancakes. There's tons of them. They eat lots of them per day. And one of the things we're trying to quantify is, are they selecting these beaches because there's more prey or more food there? So some of my grad students are using nets that we pull to count how many fish are in these areas. We're taking tissue samples from the sharks, and we can look at their chemical composition and measure their chemical composition relative to the things that are present in their area that they might be eating. So, you know, the old saying, you are what you eat. We can use what's in their muscle and what's in their blood, those chemical signatures, to match to food that they may be consuming in the area. And the other cool technique we're using is I have another grad student, Zach Merson, who can simply take water samples, and then we can extract DNA that have sloughed off all these animals and identify and quantify how much DNA is present in the water. So we can ask, are there white sharks present? And then what type of food items might be present? So that gives us the ability to try to figure out, are they at this aggregation site because there's food? And if the prey abundance starts to go down, is that a cue to abandon that aggregation site and go somewhere else? So one of the other tools my grad student uses are what are called BRUVs. These are baited remote underwater video systems. So basically what we can do is drop these in the water, and they have a GoPro. We put a little piece of squid in a little tube, and then it lures things to that so we can take a picture. So we get video of that, and she's processed hundreds or thousands of hours of video. And we even get sharks that pass through that. And we can identify individuals based on their unique markings. So by using these tools, we're able to piece together a better understanding of what the sharks are doing along the beaches. So how do we get this data out to the public and make it public friendly? And this is where we really could use your help. One of the things we know appeal to the public are good graphics, good animations. It helps them better understand what the sharks are doing when they're at these beaches. And we lack the computational skill to generate a lot of these graphics, but we have mounds and mounds of data to do that. And while we want it to be data rich and data realistic, there are times when you can better represent those data just using an animation. So we're always seeking out help. And we have these things called Shark Shacks that we use all summer long. We hit about 30 beaches throughout Southern California multiple times. I have an army of students that man these. And basically, we use it to educate the public about beach safety at the beaches. So we have the ability to show graphic information and dynamic information at these. And we found it's very popular, but we need more of it. In addition, I hire a lot of Cal State Long Beach art students to help us develop infographics, taking the science that we're learning so that we can output this in a way to help educate and inform the public. So a lot of these can be found on lifeguard stations. They can be found on the back of lifeguard towers. And it's basic information about what we're learning about the sharks and the animals that are at the beaches that people share with these animals. In addition, our goal is to try to make more dynamic content, PSAs, and we need good graphics for that as well. We came up with a comic book series, believe it or not. This is a comic book series that we designed for ages 9 through 16. We have paper versions of this. They become so popular that we produced other versions. This one's on beach safety. This one is on marine pollution, and this one's on shark spies, about all the technology we use to try to get kids interested in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. So these are all available online. You can go to the Shark Lab website and you can read these like a regular comic book. And we have them in both English and in Spanish. But we also have paper versions. We've given out over 50,000 copies of these. Our next steps. So our state funding ends in June of this year. So I am aggressively seeking refunding. Our goal is to try to find, because the state has a very good budget this year, it's very unlikely we'll receive state funding. So we're looking for private foundation funding to continue our program. And in addition, we want to expand. And one of our goals of expansion would be to create a Pacific Shark Center, possibly somewhere in LA, where we could actually have lots of dynamic content and show the public a lot of what these sharks are doing along the coast in real time. So we're really excited. We're trying to raise funds for this. A lot of the cities are very interested in this because this would be a big tourist draw, and it would be great for educating the public. So most of our funding in the past has come from the state of California, but we have received funding from Monterey Bay Aquarium, Alta Sea, and from private donors. We have research collaborations with a lot of different institutions. And of course, we work with all beach cities and counties in the state of California. So with that, hopefully I can answer some of your questions.
You gave us enough information. Let's just see if we can go back on a couple. That was really amazing, Chris. I'm really impressed with just the amount of information you already have. I almost feel like I know these sharks a little bit better, even though I know none of them personally. But I know that you have studied the psychology or the physiology as well as the behavioral studies about these things. Are you seeing any like emotionality to some of these sharks? I mean, or is it just behavioral, just reactionary to temperatures of water?
No, so what's really interesting is when we combine all the tools, right? The telemetry tracking, where we can look at their movements. And when you saw those animations, it looks like they're right next to each other, right?
Yeah, yeah.
But when we look at the drone footage, they actually don't like to be right next to each other. So there's almost like this love-hate relationship. They're social in that they like to be in the same area, but they're not like a school of fish. So, and in fact, there's a hierarchy, there's a pecking order. So the bigger sharks kind of rule the neighborhood and the smaller sharks kind of get pushed to the side.
Right.
You see a little bit of structuring in terms of size. But it's interesting. We don't really understand what shapes a lot of that yet.
I mean, your Padero Beach animation, it kind of like, and at this one time of day, it was like, the Brazilian festival really get active, and it looks like they're all dancing around each other.
Yes. Yeah, and that's the interesting part. So how much of that is social? How much of that is just, this is a good place to hang out because the water's warm?
This is where we hang and keep our mouths open and eat food. Yep.
Right? So these are all the things that are our next steps that we want to figure out. More smart tag tracks. We want to do more of that.
Uh-huh. I think we got a lot of comments probably from your brave students jumping in and tagging a shark. Just like, you see that as a requirement for very many students,
Yeah,
I would have to think.
the only rule in their lab is that they can't tell their moms they do that.
Yeah, dad's okay, but not.
Dads are okay. Moms, uh-uh.
So, well, how do they sequester a shark to surgically install a center or a pack?
Yeah, so
Or
we
do
have,
they make you do that, or you say, no, children, you have to learn this eventually?
yeah, so we spend a lot of time doing safety training. So all my students go through extensive training, especially for care of the animals. That's our number one priority, is that the animals are safely and humanely cared for. The other
Mm-hmm.
part is the human safety part. So we spend a lot of time training. All my students are basically EMT trained. So and we carry, trauma kits with us in the boats. Accidents happen, but we've never had an accident yet, and our goal is to keep it that way. And a lot of that's because we spend a huge amount of time practicing safe.
Safety third. I mean, safety first. Always, always, always. Let's just remember that. I think I saw one question come in illegally from chat from a guy questioning about the Monterey Bay Aquarium.
Mhm.
And I saw that they are one of your financiers.
Mhm.
So I know that you have a relationship going on with them. So I think the answer to that is yes, you have a working relationship with them. But can you say at all what it is what kind of data you're sharing or working on?
Yeah, so Mambari is the research kind of arm of the Monterey Bay Aquarium. So that institute is loaded with brilliant people. They have all this wonderful technology that they developed themselves, and basically we really enjoy working with them. Their interests are a little different than ours, but I do talk to folks there, and we pick brains in terms of robots and how we can use robotics better. For 10 years, my colleagues and I from Harvey Mudd had grants from National Science Foundation to develop shark tracking robots. I didn't get into that because that would require a lot more detail.
Mm.
But that's a very cool technology where we've trained robots to follow tag sharks. And the robots actually adapt the shark's behavior so that the robots aren't influencing the shark's behavior.
Hmm. Okay. You
Yeah.
work on that one.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Well, I mean, otherwise it becomes a game.
It is a game. It is a game. And the sharks, can hear these objects. They know the objects are present. And they'll actually go investigate the robots. And we program the
Yeah.
robots to move away when the shark follows them. And when the shark gets bored and turns, the robots turn and start to follow the shark again. We can tell the
Well,
robot.
it's like, you give a little squeaky toy to a pet and they just go squeaky, 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 squeaky. They just want to make it go squeaky, squeaky, squeaky and annoy everybody else as much as possible. So be careful what you give your shark friends, I guess.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm getting a lot of questions in. One, wondering if you've tracked the juveniles through a longer period of their life cycles, like what are they doing when they're not near the coast?
Yeah. So we've used the satellite tags and the acoustic tags. The longest we've been able to track a shark is 11 years. So from the time it was a
Wow.
baby till 11 years old. And that shark that we tracked for 11 years, we estimate travels on average about 8,000 miles per year. So that shark made 4 consecutive round trip migrations to Baja and back during its
That's a
first
lot of food. That's
years.
a lot. As a mother, you can just think about how much food you gotta feed the kids. That's
Yeah.
a lot of food if you're gonna go travel that far. Wow. All right. I mean, I didn't mean to cut you off there, Chris. If you had to finish that thought.
Well, one of the things that we do know, we know a lot about the adults. My colleagues have tagged a lot of adult white sharks off the Farallones, Año Nuevo, Guadalupe Island. So we've learned a lot about what the adults do. They're only inshore to feed on seals and to give birth. And then they migrate out to the middle of the Pacific. We don't really know what they're doing out there, but they're clearly eating. Probably not seals, maybe sperm whales and squid and things like that. And
Mm.
but the juveniles, however, behave very differently. The small ones, What we don't know is when do they make that transition? When do they start acting like an adult? So we know a lot about the babies, we know a lot about the adults, and we know very little about the teenagers.
Hmm. Sounds like every parent in America. We don't know what the teenagers are doing, parents,
Neither do
but
they, apparently.
fingers crossed. Anyway, uh, are you asking for collaboration suggestions for visualization? Because we could jump into that circle
Yes,
immediately.
yes,
Um, I mean, we could even start a little here right now. I know that um, a lot of people feel it is the safer route to go with just start 2D. A lot of people that just want to see their data really nice and clean.
yeah,
It's the same kind of thinking when feeding information to small children is to keep it very, very simple because, oh my God, they can't understand anything too challenging, which is untrue. They can understand quite heavy information.
right,
But so I get the whole, keep it really, really simple, keep it 2D. But
yep,
some of the data that you guys are picking up, I just feel like it's screaming to be overlaid and put together. And these sharks are screaming to be, have their little 3D camera moment underwater
yep,
in
yeah,
their slow-mo jump out of the water and all of
yep.
those lovely things.
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. And we need help. My most of my students are doing a lot of this in R. There a few of them that are getting more proficient in Python, but the data sets are very rich. For example, our acoustic telemetry data set, I think we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 million detections over the last 10 years. So the data set's getting pretty robust. So to build animations, one of our challenges is to build animations on the fly. Like if somebody wanted to go through and look at the movements of a single white shark, we might have 800,000 detections for that shark over that 10-year period. To build that animation takes computational time online, and they don't want to wait 20 minutes for this thing to load. Um, so we're always looking for creative ways of improving those graphics. And one way might be daily. You daily create MOVs, and then somebody wants to select a shark or a time period. You can trim the MOV down to that time period, but you don't have to compile it every single time from all the tracks. So we're always looking for help with that sort of thing.
I think that is a start. What you just said is a start. And I think you're going to, as soon as you implement that within the next 3 days, you'll find that you need more power continuously. More power, more power.
Yeah, yeah. And then the other one is the 3D environmental data, because
Yeah.
sharks are moving up and down through the water column and they're choosing where they want to be. So
Yeah,
Emily's,
no, that's fascinating too. And also, I think you're going to have so much data just on, I mean, because we have other uses for the data in the oceans right now also. So it seems like it's the temperatures and the fluidity, et cetera, are also become part of the character of all of the studies going on. So it's not just the shark, it's the shark got caught up in this huge jet stream and then and then and then and then. So it seems like just the temperatures from surface down below. I mean, even the U.S. Weather Service was getting, slapped down between that and Europe with not taking the correct temperature height from the surface and kind of changing the story a little bit by where they were taking the temperature. So I think that's going to become a requirement for, savvy listeners of shark data as to, yeah, but where did they take the surface temperature? Is it all the way down to the bottom of where they were sleeping, or where was this all from? So you have to be able to present this data somehow rapidly. And they want to see it on their Apple phones, and they want to see it on their little wrist phones, and they want to see it, 15 ways from Sunday in real time.
yeah.
Uh, Oh, there's so many questions coming in. I don't know if I can get to all of these. Kyle Carlin asked, there's an interesting device known as the Mayflower 2 that is somewhat similar, but that the technology is used to scan the oceans. Is there a future where your technology will be utilized for that as well? Or is the atomic underwater vessel going to strictly be used for sharks and only sharks? I feel that, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so like Mombari and many of the other organizations like Woods Hole, Oceanographic, and Scripps, everybody is moving towards autonomous vehicles, and that's really the wave of the future. So what's limited, I think most of our understanding of the ocean has been technology. We just haven't had the technology. So now sensors, we're getting a wider variety of sensor types. And then, of course, you have to put those sensors on something, right? Either mount them somewhere so they're continuously measuring something, or put them in a vehicle that's moving. And putting them on boats and ships and submarines is very cost prohibitive, right? But putting them on autonomous vehicles is the wave of the future. What we're next moving towards are surface vehicles. So we have something that looks like a little sunfish sailboat. It's got a solar panel, it's got a communication mast, and then we can equip it. It's got a big payload, so we can have it, have video cameras. It can have, hydrophones, so we're listening for sharks. It can have side scan sonar, and we just want it to move back and forth along these beaches where the sharks are to help get us more information and then relay that in real time. So
come on, Chris, the reason why George Lucas put his house right there, it's got these things scanning the beaches, every single rock, every single different place, everywhere. Right. So he knows exactly that there's no scuba divers about ready to attack his house.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So George has the front row seat to all this great technology that we have out there.
Looks fascinating.
Yeah, it's interesting why the sharks pick certain areas.
George's house. Yeah, they're being programmed by who knows who. Let me just skip around a little bit. Greg Panos has a question. Have you ever tried creating real-time 3D data environments for exploration in VR headsets in your data, or thought about it going that way?
I've definitely thought about it, but I don't have the expertise. So
it's not, I don't know that this is the expertise, because you have the needs to do all of this. It's just by somehow matching words with financiers where those kids need more whatever to go fall off of, and cite to their parents why they need more of that. But I can see how being able to more and more and more and more rapidly be able to create the 3D environments that these things are swimming around in, and the temperatures and the fluidity and turbulent and everything else that's going along with that.
So we did develop started to develop a VR platform to give people the experience of what it would be like to be a juvenile white shark. So the way the experience starts is they're a researcher in the boat, and they put a tag on the shark. And when the shark gets released, they become the shark. And then in that VR realm, they get to explore things like a shark would. So we have the ability to give them that experience of what it might be like to be a juvenile shark. And how would you, determine how to catch a stingray, or this thing that you think might be a jellyfish is actually a plastic bag. Gives people the opportunity to do that. So we have all the science. I would have to recruit somebody who does VR building.
No, but what you have is definitely a resource that could be picked up and paid for by people who need a whole lot more data on these jellyfish, zony, spiny things that could be eaten by other larger spiny things. Who knows what all the stuff is, who's eating who out there. And I'm sure within the data that you're collecting, some of this ancillary other data is being collected as well. And people need that kind of data, right?
Right. And that's the other thing we're working with NOAA with. We're partners with NOAA, and we have what is called an ERDAP server. So ERDAP server is what NOAA uses to serve all its environmental data to the public. So we have our own that we've stood up, and we can share all our environmental data, and our detection data will be shared through this ERDAP server. So because it's paid for by the state of California, it's all public access. We just need to find the best ways to make it, scientists can easily access the data, but the general public,
Yeah.
like you were saying,
Well, it's like your client becomes removed from the people of California, and your client becomes those who need data,
right.
which is not necessarily what the California educational system was set up to do. However, it seems like the two can switch courses moving forward in life together, happily, dancing into the sunset. Could come up with a way, especially if you're going to be shark attacker people, that, because not we can't all do this in the plains, but that you shark people can supply this kind of data that also deals with climate temperatures. Seems like that just goes hand in hand, and that should not be a hard fundraiser.
Yeah, well, my goal is right now I have to raise $7.5 million for our next 5 years. So
Ah.
so if anybody knows any brave foundations out there who would find some.
Well, let's just hit two more right here, right now. Ed Lance, who is Mr. Dome himself, he says, have you done any work with the National Center for Supercomputing Applications, the NCSA? They were originally the first 7 or more supercomputer centers sent down at all the major universities. Anyway, some of the work and showing it, I think what Ed's point here is also, and showing it in dome-like environments, especially since you're going to be swimming underwater. I think that's something that should be taken to heart.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point.
Yep. We can always hook you guys up afterwards. And Valerie Johnson Redo asks, will you be able to deter shark attacks on humans with any of your tracking devices that might react to audio signals given off by sharks eventually?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that's one that we don't really know why sharks bite people. That's still a mystery to us. Our two possible explanations is predation or defense. And we know that it can't be predation because there are plenty of opportunities for a hungry shark along Southern California beaches, but it's so rare. We're talking about you have a better chance of winning Powerball than you do of being bitten by a white shark along the Southern California beach.
Right.
So we at this point we don't see a need to develop a way of protecting people unless something changes and shark behavior.
Right.
What we do think we're gonna need to start thinking about is as the population continues to grow, and people know about these sharks out there, our biggest worry is that people will go out and start harassing the sharks, chasing them around. We've heard of people trying to hide them. Then somebody's going to get hurt. And
yeah. Well, like swimming with dolphins, dolphins seem to be more friendly. They turn around and come back over and say, "Hey, how you doing? No, I don't want to play with you," and they swim off. But sharks are like, "Why? Did I miss something? Are you supposed to be tasty? You don't look tasty." No, I'm still swimming off. They're just two different behaviors completely.
Yeah.
But I don't see the big guys wanting to bite. Really, it's the little guys who are just kind of looking for how they're supposed to feed themselves. Period.
Right. Yep.
Anyway, a lot of good stuff came out of this whole lovely event. I'm really, really thrilled that you were even available to spend a half hour and talk to us. We'll put this together in a viewable format and put it up on our YouTube channel. Really, really appreciate the time you've taken here, and I'm glad that you also made kind of the plea for where you are technologically, because we definitely have hundreds of thousands of people here in the state, especially, that could absolutely come to your rescue, teach students or whatever it is that you need to have done.
Yep.
write better insurance policies for all the mothers of your students.
Yeah.
Anyway, thank you all for coming, and thank you for the chapter in San Francisco, headed up by Henry Labonta. The San Francisco, it used to be known as the Bay Area chapter, and then now it's the San Francisco chapter, broken apart from San Jose. We're the Los Angeles chapter. There's also just across the border up north, we have the Vancouver chapter. There's just chapters all over the place. Anyway, if you're looking for a chapter, you can come ask us directly, or if you're looking for specific types of people, like just what Chris has done here tonight, I'm working on this technology. This is the kind of things I'm looking for. However you are looking for data, need data, et cetera, we're here to help. We're the Los Angeles chapter of ACM SIGGRAPH. You should join one of these chapters. Anyway, thank you all for coming. We'll see you next time real soon. Ciao.
Thank you.